Her own father sold her to a blind Alpha for a pouch of gold, certain he was finally rid of a useless daughter. He never knew that beneath her plain sleeve she carried a healing gift older than both their packs. Welcome to our channel. Tell us, where are you listening from today? The rain over the Olympic Peninsula did not fall the way rain fell in other places. It came down in long silver sheets that pressed the cedar forest flat and turned the gravel road outside the Ashbury cabin into a river of pale mud. It had been falling for 3 days when Hollis Ashbury came home, wearing a face Wren had never seen on him before. He shut the door, and the rain followed him in on the shoulders of his coat, and he would not look at her. Wren was 22 years old, and had spent 5 of those years not saying a certain name aloud. The name had belonged to a boy who had not come back from the woods one summer afternoon, and her father had taken it for grief and let her carry it in silence, and her father had never asked what else she carried. He did not know that on the day she had walked out of those woods alone, something had woken in her hands, a warmth no bigger than a candle, blooming under her left palm whenever she pressed it flat against something cold. A warmth her grandmother on her mother's side had once whispered about on the only afternoon Wren had ever spent with her. A gift, the old woman had called it, with eyes that did not blink. A debt the moon owes us, child. Do not spend it cheap. Wren had not spent it, not once, not in 5 years, because the only person she had ever wanted to save with it could not be saved, and because her father, if he ever found out what she could do, would sell her for the weight of it before nightfall. She moved quietly through the cabin, the way she had learned to move, and she set down the kettle and waited. "There is a man coming for you in 3 days, Hollis said. She did not understand at first. Then she saw the leather pouch on the table. She saw the rolled parchment beside it, bound with red wax and stamped with a wolf and a crescent moon. She saw how he could not meet her eyes. "What did you do?" she whispered. "What had to be done?" His voice was thin and brittle as cedar bark in winter. "We are going to lose the land, Wren. There is no working past it. The pack at Bramblewood made an offer. A clean one." The word Bramblewood went through her like a blade. She kept her hand very still on the kettle. "Bramblewood," she said. "Bramblewood." Hollis cleared his throat. "Their Alpha is taking a wife. He's blind, child. Has been for 7 years. They say he asked the matchmaker for a quiet woman, one who would not run, one whose face would not be missed. I gave him your name. The wedding is set for the next full moon, which falls in 3 days. He pays the bride price in gold. He asks no questions." The kettle in her hand was suddenly very heavy. The boy whose name she had not said in 5 years had grown up in a pack called Bramblewood. She had never been told who his father was. She had only known the name of his home because he had whispered it once into her hair on a riverbank that no longer existed. It could not be the same Alpha. That boy was dead. She had seen him fall. It could not be. "You sold me," she said, and her voice did not shake because she had spent 5 years teaching it not to. "I gave you a name," her father answered. "A roof, a station. He is not buying a servant, Wren. He is taking a wife. Pack law. Once the moon is over the trees and the vows are spoken, you are Luna of Bramblewood, and there is nothing on this earth, including me, that can take that from you." But there was a strange light in his eyes when he said it. Wren did not miss it. Her father had never looked at her like a man who was giving her away. He was looking at her like a man who had just placed a piece on a board. "Father," she said carefully. "What else?" "Nothing else." "Father." Hollis turned his face to the window. The rain was hammering harder now. He spoke without looking at her. "The Bramblewood Alpha will not last the season," he said quietly. "His own council is preparing to remove him. When he falls, his title passes to his next of kin. and his next of kin is a man who has been talking to me for 2 years about what could be done with the holdings on the coast, if only there were a tie of blood between our families. A long pause. You will be Luna for 1 moon, Wren, maybe 2. Then you will be a widow, and you will be very useful to me, to both of us. I'm giving you a station, child. I am not throwing you away. Wren stood very still. She understood finally that her father had not sold her for gold. He had sold her for territory. She was not a daughter to him. She had never been. She was a hinge in a door he meant to walk through. "What is his name?" she said, and her own voice came to her from very far away. "Bastian," Hollis answered. "Bastian Hale, Alpha of the Bramblewood Pack." The kettle slipped from her fingers and struck the floor. She did not feel it. She did not hear it. She was already somewhere else, on a riverbank, under a curve of cedar, listening to a boy of 17 tell her, with his mouth against her temple, that his name was Bastian, and that one day he would come for her, and that nothing on earth would keep him from doing so. A boy who had stepped between her and a thing with claws on a bright afternoon, and who had not come up out of the river afterward, no matter how long she had screamed his name into the wind. He had been alive. All this time, he had been alive, and her father had just sold her to him. She turned her face away from Hollis so that he would not see what was happening in it. Outside, somewhere far inside the Hoe, in a hall of stone and cedar where no lamp had been lit in 7 years, an Alpha named Bastian Hale lifted his head suddenly from the carved arm of his chair, as if he had heard a sound that nothing else in the room had heard. His unseeing eyes moved toward the rain, and for the first time in 7 years, in the absolute dark behind his eyes, Bastian Hale saw a flicker of light. First light on the 3rd day came grey and washed of colour. Wren stood on the porch of the cabin, with a small carpet bag at her feet, wearing her mother's travelling coat. Her hair was pinned plain, her hands were folded. She had not slept in 3 nights. She had not eaten in 2. Inside her chest, behind a calm grey gaze, a single sentence was repeating itself in a voice that did not belong to the girl her father had raised. He is alive. He is alive. He is alive. The wagon came up the road at 6:30. 2 black horses, a covered cart, a driver in a moss-coloured oilskin, who climbed down without a word and lifted her bag inside. He had a long white scar across the back of his hand. He offered her a steady palm. "My name is Calder," he said. "I serve the Alpha. He has asked that you be brought safely. That is all you need to know of me for now." She climbed up. The wagon moved off into the wet morning. She did not turn to see the cabin disappear behind the cedars. She had already done that part in her mind, hours ago, by the window. For a long while, there was only the sound of hooves on packed needles. The forest closed around the cart like a green cathedral. She rode with her hands folded inside her sleeves so that no one would see them tremble. After an hour, she could not hold the question any longer. "Calder." "Yes, child." "How did he lose his sight?" Calder did not turn his head. The reins moved gently in his hands. "Saving the great love of his life," he said. "But that is a long story, child. Too long for this wagon, and not mine to tell in pieces. The ones who wish to know how it happened can find it told in full, in its proper place. The link is pinned in the comments below this story." Wren went very quiet. The wagon rolled on. She understood then 2 things at once. The first was that everyone in Bramblewood already knew that their Alpha had lost his eyes for a girl. The second was that not one of them knew her name. He had not given it in 7 years. He had carried her in a silence so complete that even the man who served him did not speak it aloud. Long before the wagon, long before the contract, long before the blind Alpha of Bramblewood ever lifted his head at the sound of a stranger's footsteps in his hall, there was a forest. There was a girl he was never supposed to meet, and a boy who chose to love her anyway. The story of who she was, and of the afternoon that took everything from them both, has been written in full. The ones who want to walk back into that forest will find it waiting on the link pinned in the comments below. The wagon kept moving east, deeper than Wren had ever been allowed in her life. The trees here were older, the light was older. The moss hung from the branches in long green veils, and the river that paralleled the road ran black under the rain. She had grown up on the edge of these woods. She had never been inside their heart. After a long silence, Calder spoke again. "There are some things I will tell you, child, because you will arrive at his door in 2 hours, and it is not fair to send you in blind. He does not sleep in a bed. He sleeps in a chair beside a cold window. He has not been touched on purpose by another living soul in 7 years. He runs his pack from a hall where no lamp is lit, because lamps comfort the people around him, and he has not yet learned how to ask for that comfort. He is not a cruel man. He is a man who has decided, for reasons that are his own, that gentleness is a thing he does not deserve. You will need to understand that if you are going to walk into his house tonight." "Why does he need a wife?" "He does not need a wife." Calder's hands were quiet on the reins. "He needs a witness. There are men in his own council who would see him removed from his seat before the next full moon passes. He asked the matchmaker for a woman who owed nothing to either side. Your father's name was the first name offered. The Alpha did not know your face. He only knew that the offer was clean. He asked one question of the matchmaker before signing the contract." "What question?" "He asked whether the woman he was buying had the right to refuse him on the night. Whether pact law required her word, freely given, before the binding could be made." A faint, careful smile. "When the matchmaker confirmed that it did, he signed the contract within the hour. He has not asked your name since. Not once. I think he is afraid that if he knows it before you speak it, he will not be able to bear it if you choose to walk away." Wren turned her face to the window of the cart and pressed her forehead against the wet canvas. She did not cry. She had learned over 5 years how not to, but she sat with the truth of it inside her chest until she could carry the weight of it without breaking. The man who had been carried to her in a leather pouch was not buying her. He had bought a stranger so that he would not have to ask anyone he loved to stand beside him in the dark. He still believed she was dead. Of course he did. She had been the one screaming his name into the wind. He had been the one falling. The wagon came down through a curtain of mist, and the trees opened, and Wren saw Bramblewood for the first time. It was not a fortress. It was a long, low hall of dark stone and cedar, set into the slope of a hill above a slow, black river, with a single high chimney from which no smoke rose. A few outbuildings clustered around it like sleeping animals. There were perhaps 12 people in the yard, all turning to watch the wagon come in. A woman with iron-grey hair stood on the steps with her hands clasped at her waist. Behind her, framed in the open doorway of the hall, sat a tall figure in a carved oak chair. He did not rise. He did not turn his head. But over his eyes, drawn straight and exact across the upper half of his face, lay a wide band of black silk, tied behind the long, dark hair Wren had loved with the whole of her 17-year-old heart. Calder stopped the horses. He set the brake. He looked at her, and what he saw in her face made his own go still. "Child," he said quietly, "you have gone the color of paper." She did not answer. She was looking at the boy she had buried in her mind for 5 years, sitting in a chair on a porch she had never seen, waiting for a stranger to come down the aisle of a hall that was about to become her home. Wren Ashbury stepped down from the wagon, and the world that had ended for her on a riverbank in summer 5 years ago began, in absolute silence, to start again. The woman with iron-grey hair came down the steps to meet her. She was tall, broad in the shoulder, with a weathered face that did not smile easily but did not lie either. She took Wren's hand the way a mother takes the hand of a girl who has just survived something. "My name is Esther Ronan," she said. "I have run this house since before our Alpha was born. You will be safe under my roof, child. You have my word." She glanced once at Wren's face, and her brow tightened. "When did you last eat?" "I do not remember." "Then we will fix that first." Esther did not let go of her hand. "Come. He is waiting. He will not speak long. He never does the first time. Walk slowly. He listens for everything." Wren let herself be drawn forward across the wet stones of the yard. She felt the eyes of the pack on her, 11 or 12 of them, watching from doorways and from beneath the eaves. She did not meet them. She kept her gaze on the man in the carved oak chair, and as she crossed the threshold into the great hall, she understood with a small and ruined certainty that he had grown. He had been a boy when she had last seen him, a tall boy on the edge of becoming a man, narrow at the waist and unfinished in the shoulders. The man in the chair was not narrow anywhere. The line of his jaw had hardened. The arms that rested on the carved wood were the arms of a man who carried the weight of others on them every day. A pale scar ran from the outer corner of his left eye, where the black silk hid the rest of it, down across his cheekbone, and lost itself in the line of that jaw. The scar she had not seen happen. The scar she had only heard, from the top of the cliff, in a sound that had not left her in 5 years. "Wren Ashbury," he said. His voice had grown too. It was lower than she remembered. Quieter. The voice of a man who had decided long ago not to waste breath. But the shape of it underneath, the small lift on the second syllable of her name, was the shape it had always had. He had said her name 1,000 times in a forest she had walked out of alone. He had said her name into her hair on a riverbank, into her wrist in the dark, into the curve of her shoulder on 100 summer afternoons. He did not recognize it now. He had not been told, on the day the contract was offered, that Wren was a name. To him it was only a sound, a word a matchmaker had spoken, a stranger's word. "Yes," she said. Her own voice came out steady, she did not know how. "Come closer." She came closer. She stopped 3 paces from his chair. She kept her hands folded inside her sleeves so that he would not hear them tremble. "I'm sorry for the way you came here," he said. "I have been told what your father is. I would have offered more for you if I had thought that more would have helped. It would not have. I am sorry for that also." His head tilted, the smallest fraction, as if he were tracking something he could not name. "There are things you should know. I will say them once. I am Bastian Hale. I am Alpha of the Bramblewood Pack. I cannot see your face. I have not seen anyone's face in 7 years. I will not pretend that is a small thing, and I will not ask you to pretend either. The wedding stands tonight, at the rise of the moon. The vow has to be spoken in your hand, freely. If you say no, the contract pays out anyway, and you go home in a covered wagon, and I will not speak your name. That is the bargain. That is the only bargain I will offer." She could not answer. She did not trust her mouth. "You have until the moon comes over the trees," he said gently. "Take it. Eat. Rest. Walk in the garden if it helps. Esther will show you to your rooms." A pause. "Wren." "Yes." "May I ask you one thing?" "You may." His hand lifted from the arm of the chair. He held it open between them, palm up, in the air. He did not reach for her. He waited. "Will you put your hand in mine?" he said. "Only for a moment. I would like to know something of the woman my house is asking to marry tonight before I ask her anything else." The hall went very still. Behind Wren's shoulder, Esther did not move, but Wren felt her go rigid in a way that told her this was a thing the Alpha did not do. This was a thing the Alpha had not done with anyone in a very long time. Wren looked at the offered hand. It was a strong hand, marked by old work, the inside of the wrist crossed by a thin line of burn scar that disappeared up the sleeve. It was the hand that had once tucked a flower of white cedar behind her ear on a sunlit afternoon, while a river ran below them. She stepped forward and laid her left palm flat against his. The reaction was small. To anyone else in the room it would have looked like nothing at all. But Bastian Hale's breath caught very softly, and the muscle in his jaw tightened, and beneath the band of black silk a small, slow tremor ran through him. He did not press her hand. He did not close his fingers around it. He simply held it, the way a man holds a thing he has been searching for in the dark without knowing he was searching. "Ren," he said. "Yes. Have we met before?" The hall was a held breath. Esther did not move. Calder did not move. Ren looked at the band of black silk where his eyes should have been. She looked at the scar on his cheek. She looked at the line of his hand against hers, and knew with a calm and absolute certainty that if she said yes, he would lay the truth open to the pack, and the pack would tear her apart before the moon ever cleared the trees. Her father had not sold her to a stranger. He had sold her to a man whose own house was already trying to break him. If she was going to save him a second time, she could not do it as the girl he remembered. She would have to do it as the woman he did not. "No," she said softly. "We have not." He held her hand a moment longer. Then he let it go. "Forgive me," he said. "Sometimes I think I hear things that are not there." Ren stood at his side, and she understood with a small and ruined certainty that she had just lied to the only person on earth she had ever told the truth to. The pack did not know who she was. They could not know. Not yet. She, Ren Ashbury, was the great love whose life this man had once saved. But how it had happened, and what he had done for her on that afternoon long ago, and what she had believed about him for every day of the 7 years since, belongs to another place. The ones who want to hear that story told in full will find the link pinned in the comments below. She did not move. She did not speak. She only stood there, looking at the blind alpha of Bramblewood, and understood that the universe had brought her back to a man who could no longer recognize her face. The room they gave her was on the western side of the hall, with a high window that looked out across the Black River toward a stand of cedars old enough to have been saplings when the first Hale walked this land. The bed was carved from the same dark wood as the great table downstairs. There was a wash basin, a small writing desk, a wardrobe, and a tall mirror covered with a length of pale cloth. "He will not come up here," Esther said, when she set down Ren's bag. "Not ever. He does not walk a staircase he cannot see the bottom of." She paused at the door. "Child." "Yes." "You did something to him down there. I do not know what, but I have served that man since he was a boy, and I have not seen his hand close around another hand since the year he came up out of the river. Whatever you did, I am asking you, mother to daughter, not to undo it by nightfall." Ren could not answer. She kept her face turned toward the window. Esther closed the door behind her without another word. The moment she was alone, Ren sat down on the edge of the carved bed and pressed both hands over her mouth. She did not weep. She had taught herself, over 5 years, not to, but she sat there with her shoulders shaking for a long time, until the storm inside her had nowhere left to go, and then she lowered her hands and looked at her left palm. Beneath the skin, very faintly, the soft amber light was already there, blooming on its own without her asking, as if it had recognized something in the air of this house and was waking up to greet it. She closed her fist over it. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not until I know." She went down to the kitchen because Esther had told her to eat, and because she did not trust her own legs in the upstairs corridor any longer. She took the back stair, the one that ran along the outer wall, and she paused on the landing because she heard voices below, One voice belonged to her father. She had not known he was in the house. He had not been at the door. He had not been in the yard. He had come in through some other entrance, and he was speaking now in the low passage outside the kitchen, with a man whose voice Wren had not heard before, and immediately did not trust. She pressed herself against the wall of the landing and listened. "The Alpha will not last the moon after this one," her father was saying. "The council has the votes. 3 signatures, you said. You have 3 signatures." "3 confirmed," the other man answered. He had the smooth, warm voice of a man who had practiced charm so long he had forgotten how to turn it off. "A 4th pledged in writing. The challenge will be called by the 2nd week of November at the latest. Once he is removed, the title passes to me. The girl by then is widowed. The girl by then is mine to place. And the girl's father," a small, careful laugh, "becomes a man of considerable interest to this pack." Considerable interest," Hollis repeated, and there was a hunger in his voice Wren had heard her whole life and never named. "2 holdings, Hollis, yours and ours, tied by blood through the girl. The coast road open to Bramblewood timber, council seats for both of us, a clean north-south corridor from the Strait to the Hoe. Do you understand what I am offering you? I am offering you the only thing your name has ever lacked, which is weight. And the girl. The girl is irrelevant. She is the door we walk through. She does not need to know any of this. She does not need to know anything at all. She has only to stand at the altar tonight, say the word, and become Luna of Bramblewood, for as long as my nephew draws breath in his chair. After that, she is simply a widow with a name worth marrying again. To the right man, of course. A loyal man. A pause. She is not, I trust, a difficult girl. She is the most obedient creature you will ever meet, Hollis said. Wren closed her eyes. She had spent 22 years being told she was nothing. She had spent 5 years carrying the warmth in her hands in absolute secrecy because her father, if he ever found out, would sell her for the weight of it. She had not, until this moment on a landing in a house she did not yet belong to, understood the shape of the thing her father had truly sold her into. He had not sold her to a blind Alpha. He had sold her to the man who was preparing to kill him. He had sold her to be a widow before the snow. And the man who stood below her, the man with the smooth voice, was the next of kin Calder had warned her about on the road. The uncle, the council's hand, the one Bastion's own pack, was already learning to fear. Wren did not move from the wall. She did not breathe. She made herself small the way she had made herself small 1,000 times in her father's kitchen, and she listened until the 2 men below her finished their bargain and parted, and she did not come down from the landing until the passage was empty again. When she finally walked back up the stair to her room, her hands were no longer trembling. Something else had taken their place. It was not anger. Anger she knew. Anger was an old room with a familiar door. This was a room she had never been in before. It was quiet and it was cold, and it had only one piece of furniture in it, which was a decision. She closed her own door behind her. She crossed to the window. She pressed her left palm flat against the cold glass and watched the amber light bloom under her hand, brighter this time than it had been in 5 years. "I am going to say yes tonight," she said aloud to the window, to the rainforest, to her grandmother's ghost on a summer porch above Crescent Cove. "And I am going to spend every day of this marriage learning how to keep him alive." The light under her palm pulsed once, softly, and held steady. Outside, the rain was beginning to thin. Somewhere on the far side of the river, the first low note of a wolf rose and was answered, and was held again. The pack was gathering. The hour of the moon was coming. Behind her on the small writing desk that the previous occupant had not entirely cleared, Wren noticed for the first time a single object that did not belong to her. A flower of white cedar, dried, pressed flat. Older than the room she was standing in, older almost than she was. She picked it up with hands that had finally begun, after 5 years, to shake again. And she understood, looking at it, that Esther had not put her in just any room. She had put her in his. He had kept it, all this time, in a drawer in a room he no longer entered, in a house where no lamp was lit. He had kept one dried cedar flower for 7 years. Wren Ashbury sat down on the floor with the flower pressed against her chest, and she finally, in absolute silence, let herself weep. The moon came over the cedars at 7:45. Esther dressed her by candlelight in a long, soft gown, the colour of cream, with a wide cloak of pale grey wool over her shoulders against the cold. She did not pin Wren's hair. She let it fall loose down her back, the way the women of the old packs had worn it on their wedding nights for 1,000 years. She set a single white flower at her temple, fresh, picked that afternoon from the cedar at the edge of the inner grove. She did not say where she had found it. She did not have to. Wren already knew, because she had asked Esther for it through the door of her room, and because she had not been able to walk down the aisle of this hall without one. "You are quiet, child," Esther said when she had finished. "I am thinking." "That is a dangerous habit on a wedding night." "It is the only one I have." Esther looked at her for a long moment. She lifted Wren's chin with one finger and studied her face the way an old woman studies a daughter she has not yet learned how to claim. "You are not what they think you are," she said quietly. "I do not know what you are yet, but I know that. Walk in there as what you are, child. He will not see it with his eyes. He will see it some other way." "Esther, yes. If anything happens to me tonight—" "Nothing is going to happen to you tonight." "If anything does?" Wren's voice was very calm. "There is a flower of white cedar on the writing desk in my room, pressed flat, old. Please make sure it goes back into the drawer he kept it in." Esther's eyes sharpened for the first time. She did not ask. She only nodded once and stepped back. "Come, child," she said. "Your moon is up." The ceremony was held in the inner grove, in a circle of cedars old enough to remember a time before the road from Port Angeles had been cut. Lanterns hung from the lower branches. The pack stood in 2 long rows, perhaps 80 in all, in dark wool and oilcloth, their faces turned to the center of the clearing where 2 figures waited. The elders, 3 of them, stood with their hands clasped, and before them, kneeling on a folded grey blanket in the moss, was Bastian Hale. He had changed his shirt. The black silk band over his eyes had been replaced with a wider one, ceremonial, embroidered along the edge with a thin silver thread that caught the lantern light. His long hair was tied back, his hands rested on his knees. He looked, for the first time since she had seen him, less like a wounded animal and more like a man who had decided to be still. Wren walked the aisle of cedars alone. Her father was not there. She had not asked where he had gone. She did not need to. She walked between the 2 rows of pack members with her grey cloak around her shoulders, and her hands folded at her waist, and she did not look at any of them, and she did not stop until she stood at the edge of the grey blanket, and Bastian's head lifted toward her like a man tracking the sun. "You came," he said. His voice was so low only she could hear it. "I said I would think about it. And I have thought." A small, careful breath left him. His hands tightened on his knees. He waited. Wren knelt. She lowered herself onto the blanket facing him, close enough that her knees touched his. Up close, in the lantern light, she could see the fine tremor running through his shoulders that no one else in the grove would have noticed. He was not calm. He had only learned how to look it. The oldest of the 3 elders stepped forward. She was a small woman, with white hair braided in 2 long ropes down her back, and her voice, when she spoke, was the voice of a woman who had bound 100 couples in this grove and remembered every one of them. "Bastian Hale of Bramblewood, Do you take this woman into your house, your name and your protection, under the moon that watches us tonight? I do. Wren Ashbury of the Coast Road. Do you take this man into your house, your name and your trust, under the moon that watches us tonight? She thought of a riverbank. She thought of a flower in a drawer. She thought of the smooth voice on the landing, and of the leather pouch on her father's table, and of the warmth that had been waking in her hands all afternoon, as if it had finally, after 5 years, remembered what it was for. I do, she said. Her voice did not shake. Then give him your hand. She lifted her left palm. He found it with the slow, careful mapping motion of a man who lived now by touch. His fingers closed around hers. Speak the binding, the elder said. There were words. They were old words, older than the road, older than the pack, and Esther had taught them to her in the candle-lit room with the patience of a woman who knew how much they would matter. Wren spoke them with her eyes open, and her gaze on the band of silk across his face. Bastien spoke them back to her in a voice that was not entirely steady, and as the last syllable left his mouth, something in the grove changed. It was not visible. It was not loud. But every wolf in that circle of 80 drew breath in the same instant, as if a great quiet thing had passed through them, and the small white flower at Wren's temple gave off, for a half-second only, the softest amber glow. The elder smiled. The moon has answered you, she said. Rise, Luna of Bramblewood. Bastien stood. He drew Wren up with him by the hand he had not yet released. Around them, the pack lowered their heads, one row and then the other, in the old gesture of acknowledgement. From somewhere on the far side of the river, 3 long wolf notes rose and held, and were answered by a fourth. The mate bond between them, dormant under 5 years of grief and 7 years of dark, woke fully for the first time. Wren felt it land in her chest like a hand pressed flat over her heart. Across from her, Bastien's breath broke audibly, and beneath the embroidered band, a single tear ran free down the line of the scar. He did not let go of her hand. At the back of the grove, half hidden behind a cedar trunk, Garrick Hale watched the binding finish. He lifted a small silver cup to his lips and drank, and he leaned toward the man beside him, and his voice, when it came, was quiet and amused. Let them have this night, he said. A marriage is only ever as strong as the morning that follows it, and the morning, Hollis, the morning is ours. The feast was small. Bastien had asked for that, Esther told her later. He had asked for a circle of long tables in the great hall, a single course of venison and bread, and the dark wine of the coast. No music, no speeches, no toasts that required him to find a glass he could not see. The pack ate with their hands and their voices low. The bonded pair sat at the head of the table side by side, his right hand resting open on the wood between them, and Wren laid her left hand on top of his without speaking, and did not lift it for the length of the meal. Across the room, in seats reserved for counsel, 2 empty chairs had been set out. Garrick Hale had not stayed for the dinner. Hollis Ashbury had not been invited. Wren did not eat much. Bastien did not eat at all. He sat very still in his chair, and from time to time the muscle in his jaw would tighten the smallest fraction, as if he were listening for something he could not yet name. Once, only once, he turned his face fully toward her in the lantern light, and the embroidered silk across his eyes was wet. When the last plate had been cleared, he stood. "Wren," he said. He held out his arm. "Will you walk with me?" She rose. She took the offered arm. He led her, slowly, with the careful, mapped step of a man who knew every board of his own hall, down the length of the long table and through a side passage she had not yet been shown. The corridor he walked her down was narrow and unlit. The wall on the right was stone. The wall on the left, after a turn, became cedar planks fitted close together. At the end of it stood a heavy door bound in iron, with a latch worn smooth from 1,000 winters. Bastian found the latch without searching for it. "The West Tower," he said. "No one comes up here but me, not Esther, not Calder. No one has been inside these rooms in 7 years." He pushed the door open. She had been expecting the dark of a closed room. What she saw made her breath catch. The tower was not a single chamber. It was a tall, round room with a high-vaulted ceiling and 3 narrow windows that looked east, south, and north. The walls were lined with shelves, and on the shelves were books, more books than she had ever seen in one place, the leather of their spines pale with dust. There was a long writing desk under the south window. There was a deep armchair by a cold hearth. There was a narrow bed under a wool quilt the colour of cream. There was no lamp burning. There had not been a lamp burning here in 7 years. "You read," she said softly. "I did." He did not move from the doorway. "I have not opened one of those books since the fire. Esther dusts them once a month. I asked her to. I did not want them to know they had been forgotten." She did not know what to do with that. She did not know what to do with any of it. She stood in the doorway of a room that was the inside of his head, and she felt, for the first time since she had stepped down from the wagon, the full weight of what had been taken from him. "Wren." "Yes. I will not ask you to stay in this room tonight. I will not ask you to share that bed. You are bound to me under pack law, but pack law has never been able to bind a heart, and I will not pretend to mine the one thing I cannot earn." His hand was still on the latch of the door. "Esther will show you back to the room she gave you this morning. I will be in this chair. We will speak in the morning, when the moon is down, and we will decide together what kind of marriage we are going to make." She did not move. "Bastian." "Yes. I do not want to go back to that room tonight." A small silence. "Then where," he said carefully, "would you like to go?" "I would like," she said, "to go outside." He turned his face toward her. Beneath the embroidered band, his mouth moved very slightly. It was not quite a smile. "As it happens," he said, and his voice had gone rough at the edges, "I have asked Esther to prepare something outside, for tonight. Whether you came up to this tower or not, whether you said yes in the grove or not. I had her set it down anyway, because I did not want this night to pass without offering you the only thing I could think of to offer." He paused. "I am told it is in the garden behind the tower. There are candles. There is a quilt. There is wine. I cannot see any of it, Wren. I do not know if it is beautiful. I asked Esther to make it so. I hope it is to your liking." Wren did not trust her voice. She put both of her hands around his arm, and she held it the way a woman holds something she has just been given back after a very long time. "Show me," she said. While she was changing into the lighter dress Esther had left for her, the dress meant for the garden, and the candles, and whatever else the night had been planned to hold, Wren heard a sound in the corridor outside her door. It was a footstep, slow, careful, not Esther's, not Calder's, not the heavier tread of any pack member she had passed in the hall that evening. It was the soft, deliberate footstep of someone who did not want to be heard, and it paused, for the smallest fraction of a second, outside her door. She froze with her hand on the laces of the dress. The footstep moved on. She listened until it had faded entirely, until the corridor was silent again, until even the distant sound of the river was the loudest thing in the house. Then she finished tying the laces with hands that had gone very steady. She tucked the dried cedar flower from the writing desk into the inner pocket of the cream wool wrap Esther had laid out for her. She did not know yet whether she would show it to him in the garden. She only knew that she would carry it down with her. Whatever Garrick Hale was planning for the morning, he had already begun to move pieces in the dark of the corridor tonight. But Wren Ashbury, who had walked out of a forest alone 5 years ago and had not spent a single drop of her grandmother's gift since, was no longer the girl who had stood in a kitchen yesterday and watched a kettle fall. She lifted the latch of her door. She stepped into the corridor, and she went down to meet the man who had once died for her, in a garden he had asked to be lit, on the only night that mattered. The garden behind the West Tower was not a garden in the way a town has gardens. It was a small clearing of moss and old stone, bound on 3 sides by a low cedar hedge, with a flat ledge of mossy rock at the centre, wide enough for 2 people to sit on. There were no flower beds. There was no path. The only ornament was a single curve of stone, arranged in a slow half-circle near the ledge, the kind of thing the old families set out when they wanted the moon to come down and stand somewhere specific. Esther had done what she had been asked to do. 12 white candles had been set in the curve of stone, lit and burning steady against the still air, their small flames doubling on the wet leaves of the hedge until the whole clearing was held in a soft, low gold. A quilt of cream wool lay folded over the ledge. A dark bottle of wine stood unopened beside it, with 2 glasses set on a flat stone. The moon, full now and clear of the cedars, hung directly above the clearing as though it had been waiting for them. Wren stopped in the doorway of the tower with her hand on Bastian's arm, and for a long moment she could not speak. "Wren," he said quietly, "what does it look like?" She did not know how to answer him. She tried. "There are 12 candles," she said, "all white. They are set in a half-moon of stone. The flames are not moving. There is no wind tonight. The quilt is cream wool. The wine is dark. The moss is wet, but the ledge is dry where the quilt is folded." She drew in a breath that almost broke. "The moon is directly overhead, Bastian. It is the brightest I have ever seen it." His hand tightened very slightly on hers. "I cannot see it," he said, "but I hoped that it would be." "It is." He let her draw him forward. She guided him to the ledge, with the slow, careful step she had already begun to learn was the way he moved through his own house. She unfolded the quilt for them. She helped him sit. She sat down beside him with her shoulder almost touching his and her left hand resting on the wool between them, palm up in case he wanted it. He did not reach for it yet. "I cannot see this," he said again. He was speaking very low, and his voice had a strange roughness in it she had not heard from him before. "But I want you to know that I can feel all of it. The candles are burning. I can hear the small sound of the wax. There are wolves on the far ridge, 3 miles east. There are 2 more by the river. There is a perfume in this garden I cannot name. There is rain on the cedars from this morning, but it is drying. And there is something on the air that is not any of those things." A pause. "Wren." "Yes. There is a sweetness coming off your skin. I do not know what it is. I have been trying all evening to find a word for it. I cannot. I only know that I have not smelled it for a very long time, and that I had stopped believing the world contained it." She did not move. She could not. He went on quietly, the way a man speaks who has been holding the words in his chest for years. "I have spent 7 years in the dark," he said. "Most of those years I have been angry. Some of them I have been simply tired. None of them until tonight did I think I would ever be able to offer a woman something that was not made of pity or of fear. I cannot court you the way a man should court a woman. I cannot watch your face change when you laugh. I will never see what color your hair is in the morning. I do not know what your hands look like, only what they feel like, only that the left one is warmer than the right, and I do not know what to make of that yet, but I have noticed it." Another pause. "I am telling you this because I am about to make you a promise, and the promise will only be honest if you understand what it costs me to make it. Bastian. Listen to me, Wren." His voice was very low. "I will never see you. I have made my peace with that on every day of 7 years, and I have not made my peace with it tonight, but that is my burden to carry and not yours. What I can do is this. I can hear the difference between your step at noon and your step at midnight. I can know when you have walked into a room before you speak. I can tell from the change in the air when you are afraid and when you are not. I can listen to you for the rest of my life. I can know you by touch and by breath, and by the small sound the floor makes under your weight, more completely than any man who could see you ever would. I will never look upon you, but I will sense you, Wren, in every room you ever enter for the rest of my life. And if that is enough for you, and here his voice almost broke, if that is enough, then I swear to you, on the moon over this garden, and on every year I have left in this body, that I will make you the happiest woman who has ever walked into this house. The wind did not move. The candles did not flicker. Wren reached up with her right hand and laid it, very gently, against the line of his jaw, just below the embroidered band. "Bastian," she whispered. "Yes, it is enough." He drew a breath that was almost a sound. She did not let him answer it. She leaned in across the small distance the night had left between them, and she kissed him for the first time in 5 years. It was a kiss like the closing of a door that had been left open in a winter house. It was a kiss like the lighting of a hearth that had been cold so long no one in the room remembered what warmth was. He made a small, broken sound against her mouth, and his hands came up at last, the careful mapped hands of a blind man, and they found the sides of her face, and they held her there as though they were afraid she would dissolve under his fingers and leave him alone again in the dark. She drew back. She did not let him speak. She lifted both of her hands. Slowly, with the calm, certain motion of a woman who had been preparing for this for 7 years, without knowing it, she untied the embroidered silk band at the back of his head. The cloth slid loose. It fell into her lap. Beneath it, the scarred eyelids that had not opened in 7 years lay closed against the lantern light. Bastian Hale drew in a breath that shook every line of him. "Wren," he said, and his voice was the voice of a boy of 17 on a riverbank, half drowned in something he did not yet have a name for. "Wren, what are you doing?" "Open your eyes," she said. She was already weeping. The amber light in her left palm had risen of its own accord and lay glowing softly against the moss between them, brighter than any of the 12 candles in the curve of stone. "Open them, my love. Please, open them." He did. He did not see her at first. He saw only light, a soft, blooming, impossible light, the first light in 7 years. Then the light gathered itself, and it shaped itself, and out of the shape of it slowly, like a face surfacing in a river, the woman in front of him came into focus. His breath caught. He stared, his eyes filled, and in a voice so soft only she could hear it, he said, "Rennie?" For a long moment after he said it, neither of them moved. Bastian sat on the cream-wool quilt, with both of his hands still framing her face, his eyes open at last, the candles of the half-moon throwing soft light over the scarred lids that had not lifted in 7 years. He was looking at her. He was actually looking at her. Wren saw the moment he understood what he was looking at, and the moment after, when his hands began very gently to shake against her cheeks. "You are alive," he said. He said it the way a man says a prayer he has not been allowed to speak. "You are alive. You have been alive this whole time." "Yes," she whispered. "You walked out of that forest. They told me no one walked out of that forest. I walked out of it alone. I thought I had left you in the river." "I came up out of the river," he said, "a week later. I did not know where I was. I could not see. I called your name into a roof I could not see for 3 days. His thumbs moved against her temples, as if he were proving to himself that her face was there. "Rennie, Rennie, why did you not come back?" "I did come back." Her own voice was shaking now. She did not try to stop it. I went to the cliff every day for a month. There was nothing there. There was only your blood on the stones and a piece of your shirt in the river. The men from my pack pulled me away. They said no one survived that water. They said you were gone. They said your name had to die with you because your pack and my pack were never supposed to know we had met. She drew in a ragged breath. I believed them, Bastien. I believed them for 5 years. I have not said your name out loud in 5 years. He made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a man makes when something inside him that had been broken for a long time finally lets go. He pulled her in against his chest. She came willingly. They knelt on the quilt under the moon and the candles, and they held each other in the soft amber light of the warmth still glowing between her palms, and they did not speak for a long time. The only sound in the garden was the small, steady breath of the candles, and the distant wolves on the eastern ridge, and the slow, uneven breathing of 2 people who had been carrying their grief like a stone for too long, and were setting it down at last. When at last she lifted her face from the curve of his shoulder, she could see very clearly that he was still seeing her. "How?" he said. It was the only word he could find. "My grandmother," she answered softly. "On my mother's side. She told me once, when I was 9, that there was a debt the moon owed our line. She told me my hands would know how to spend it when the time came. They did not know for 13 years. They did not know until the day I lost you on the cliff. The warmth woke under my palm the same hour the men dragged me home. I never used it after that. Not once. Not in 5 years. Her eyes filled again. The only person I ever wanted to save with it was already gone. Wren. His hand found hers. He pressed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. I am here. I see that now. How much do I see? He said quietly. With these eyes. Tonight. Now. She studied his face in the candlelight. The pupils were still wide, still uncertain. The left eye, the one under the longer scar, focused more slowly than the right. He was watching her, but he was watching her the way a man watches a face through running water. I do not know yet, she said honestly. It came back. I do not know how much. I do not know if it will hold. She swallowed. Bastien, the warmth in my hands is not a thing I command. It is a thing I invite. I did not promise you your sight tonight. I do not know what I promised you. I only know that I could not lift the band off your face and let you walk back into the dark. You did not promise me my sight, he said. He drew her hand from his chest up to his mouth and kissed the center of her palm, exactly where the amber warmth had risen. You promised me my life back. That is a different thing, and it is enough, Wren. Whatever your hands choose to give me from here forward is more than I have been given in 7 years. She closed her eyes. He held her hand against his mouth for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said the thing she had been afraid he would say. I want you to listen to me carefully now, Wren. Yes. No one in this house can know that I have seen you tonight. No one, not Esther, not Calder, not the elders in the grove tomorrow morning. His eyes had gone very serious. My uncle is preparing a challenge. He has the votes. He will move within the moon. There is a trial of sight in the test of fitness. If he knows my eyes have returned, even in part, he will change the test. He will find another reason. He will not be stopped by a single piece of luck on a wedding night. The only thing that protects us tonight is that he still believes I am blind. He is, she said softly. I overheard him this afternoon, with my father. They have signed papers, Bastien. They mean to make me a widow before the snow. He did not react the way she had thought he would. He did not flare. He did not pull away. He drew her hand back down against his chest and held it there over the slow beat of his heart. Then we have until the snow, he said quietly, and we are going to use every day of it. Yes. Wren. Yes. Put the band back on me." She did not understand at first. Then she did. She lifted the embroidered silk from her lap with hands that did not want to obey her, and she tied it once again over the eyes that had only just learned how to look at her. She tied it gently. She let her fingers brush his temples as she did. He sat very still under her hands and let her cover the only thing in the world he had been waiting 7 years to see again. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will untie it again." "Yes," he answered. "Every night, Wren. Every night that I am still Alpha of this house, when the door of the tower closes behind us, you will untie it, and I will see you. And in the morning, before I go down to my pack, you will tie it back. And no one in this hall will know." She nodded. She could not speak. He drew her in against his chest one more time. They sat together on the cream wool quilt under 12 still candles, and overhead the moon held its place in the cedars, and somewhere on the far side of the garden, behind the low hedge, a footstep that should not have been there moved 1 step closer. Neither of them heard it. But it was there. Wren woke at dawn in a small spare room off the tower, where Bastien had walked her at the end of the night. The candles in the garden had burned themselves down. He had refused to let her sleep in the corridor where the unknown footstep had passed. He had not asked her to share the narrow bed in the tower. He had only set her behind a door he could lock, and he had taken his armchair in the great hall again, and the embroidered silk band had stayed firmly across his eyes. She had not slept long, but she had slept the way a woman sleeps who knows for the first time in 5 years that the person she loves is breathing in the same house. She woke to the sound of Esther on the stairs. Esther never ran. Esther was running. Wren was on her feet before her own door opened. Esther came in without knocking, grey hair half loose, an apron still tied at her waist, her face the colour of old paper. "Child." She caught Wren by both shoulders. "We need you, now, in the yard. We need anything you have." "What happened?" "Calder." Esther's grip tightened. "He was found on the stones below the stable loft a quarter of an hour ago. The boys carried him in. He is breathing, Wren, but only just. He fell, or he was made to fall. The Alpha is with him in the kitchen. Come." Wren did not stop to ask how Esther knew there was anything she could do. She would understand that later. She picked up her shawl and followed the older woman down the stairs in her stocking feet, and when she came into the kitchen, she saw Bastien already kneeling on the flagstones beside the long pine table, the embroidered band still in place over his eyes, his hand resting on the edge of the table as if he were holding the whole room up by it. Calder lay on the table. He was very still. His skin had gone grey. A dark mark spread across his ribs where someone had cut his shirt away to look at it. His breath came short and shallow, the way a man breathes when one of his lungs has begun to fail him. Behind Wren, in the doorway, a small figure stood watching. It was a young woman of perhaps 19, dark-haired, hollow-cheeked, her hands twisting at the edge of a grey wool shawl. She had not been in the grove last night. She had not been at the table at dinner. Wren had not been introduced to her yet. But Wren knew, the moment she saw the shape of the eyes in that face, that this was Lark Hale, Bastien's sister, the one Calder had told her about on the wagon, the one who lived in a small house at the edge of the inner grove, the one who had not spoken in 7 years. "Wren." Bastien had turned his face toward her step. "Esther has told me what she suspects of you. She is not wrong, is she?" "No," Wren said. "Then I am asking you, not as your Alpha, as my friend's friend. Can you help him?" She did not hesitate. She crossed to the table. She set her right hand against Calder's brow. With her left, she pressed her glowing palm flat against the bruised place over his ribs, and closed her eyes, and let the warmth she had been hoarding for 5 years pour out of her at last, the way water pours from a jug that has been sealed too long. The amber light bloomed up through her fingers. It spread across Calder's skin in a slow, soft, breathing tide. Esther made a small sound behind her, half a sob, half a word that did not finish. Bastien did not move. Lark, in the doorway, took one step into the kitchen and stopped, and did not breathe. Beneath Wren's palm, Calder's chest rose more deeply. The grey began to leave his face. The shallow rasp of his breathing slowed and steadied. The pupils that had been blown wide narrowed by a fraction. Wren held him under her hand until the warmth had done what it could, and then she let her hand fall, and she set her forehead against the edge of the table, and she breathed. "Wren," Esther whispered. "Child." "He will sleep," Wren said. Her voice was hoarse. "He has lost too much blood for the warmth to fix everything, but he will sleep, and he will wake, and he will mend. Keep him warm, keep him drinking when he comes round. Do not let him stand for 3 days." Calder's eyes did not open. But beneath the lid, very slightly, they moved, the way a man moves under a dream he is about to come up out of. And in the doorway, Lark Hale lifted both hands to her mouth. A small, terrible sound came out of her. Then a word. "Mother." The kitchen went absolutely silent. Esther turned. Bastien's head came up. Lark stood with both hands still over her mouth, and her eyes, dark as her brother's, were fixed on Wren in a way that Wren could not read. "Lark!" Bastien's voice was very gentle. He did not move toward her. He knew his sister. "Lark, sweetheart, what did you say?" "Mother." Lark said it again. The word was rough from 7 years of disuse, but it was clear. She lowered her hands. She looked at Wren. "She has mother's hands. She has mother's hands. She has mother's hands." Wren's own hands had gone cold against the table. "Bastien." Her voice was very small. "Who was your mother?" Bastien did not answer at first. Esther did. Esther came to her side and took both of her cold hands in her warm ones and looked up at her with eyes that had finally understood something they had been turning over all night. "Bastien and Lark's mother," Esther said quietly, "was a healer from the coast pack at Crescent Cove. She was the last one of the Cedarfall line. She died the same summer the Alpha lost his sight. She died in this kitchen, on this table, with her hands on a wound she could not close." Esther's eyes filled. "Her name was Maren Cedarfall, child, and your grandmother on your mother's side, the one who taught you the warmth, was her own grandmother's sister. Lark is not wrong, Wren. You are kin. You and Bastien are bound by more than a contract and a moon. You are bound by the same blood that has carried the gift of the warmth for 6 generations." Wren did not know what to do with her face. Bastien rose from the floor very slowly. He came to her side. He did not touch her. He waited until she lifted her own hand to find his. When she did, he closed his fingers around hers and held them, and his voice, when it came, was steady at last. "Then there are more reasons than I knew," he said, "for why the universe has been trying to give you back to me for 7 years." In the doorway, Lark sank to her knees. She was crying without sound, the way she had cried for 7 years, but she was crying with her mouth open, and the open mouth was speaking slowly, one word after another, after a long silence. "You came back," Lark said. "Mother, you came back." On the table, Calder Ronan drew his first deep, easy breath in 5 hours. His lips moved. Wren bent down to hear him. "Not an accident," he whispered. His voice was a thread. "Garrick, the trial, has been moved to tomorrow." The test of fitness was held the next afternoon in the long stone room beneath the council hall, the only chamber in Bramblewood that could be locked from inside. The elders sat in a half-ring on a low wooden bench. The council sat opposite, 6 of them, Garrick Hale at the centre. Behind a rope drawn taut across the room, the rest of the pack stood pressed shoulder to shoulder, perhaps 100 of them, silent as the stone. Wren stood among them. Esther was at her left. Lark was at her right, holding her hand. Hollis Ashbury was not in the room. Calder was not yet on his feet. Bastian Hale was led into the center of the chamber by two of the elders. The black silk band was over his eyes. The pack drew in a long, low breath at the sight of him and let it out slowly. He looked, walking between the two old women, like a man who had decided he would not be afraid of his own house. "Alpha of Bramblewood," the oldest elder said, "your council has called for the test of fitness. The right is theirs to call. The right is yours to answer. The trials are three: hearing, scent, sight. You will know the order when you stand before each. Do you accept the test?" "I accept." "Then we begin." The trial of hearing was simple. 6 men entered the chamber from 6 different doors, each in soft leather, and stood at 6 points around him. He had to name them in the order they had entered. He named them without hesitation. The elders nodded. The trial of scent was harder. The 2 elders carried 3 small wooden boxes to him, each containing a single herb. He had to name the herb without lifting the lid. He named all 3 on the first try. From the bench, Garrick Hale's smile thinned by a fraction. The trial of sight came last. A long black cloth was unrolled on the stone floor. On the cloth, an old sign-maker stepped forward and drew in silver chalk a single sigil. It was the binding sigil of Bramblewood, the wolf and the crescent, the sign every pup of this pack had been shown by the age of 3. The chalk shone bright against the black. "Alpha of Bramblewood," the elder said. "What is drawn before you?" Wren felt Lark's hand tighten on hers. Bastian stood in the center of the room with the silk band over his eyes. He did not move at first. The pack held its breath. He turned his face slowly down toward the cloth, as if a man with sight were studying it. He paused. "There is a circle," he said slowly, as a blind man might guess. "Drawn in silver. I cannot tell what is inside it." A small murmur went through the pack. Garrick Hale, on the council bench, allowed himself a small, careful exhalation. "Look again, Alpha," the elder said gently. "I cannot, Mother." Bastian's voice was steady. "I have not seen any color but the dark of this cloth in 7 years. Once more, Alpha, the pack has come a long way to hear your answer." Bastian let his head drop the smallest fraction. He looked to every wolf in that chamber like a man preparing to accept the end of his own seat. Then, very quietly, he lifted his chin again. "Inside the circle," he said, "there is the head of a wolf in profile. There is a crescent moon laid across the wolf's brow. The crescent is open to the right, not the left. The silver is fresh. There is a small smudge in the lower curve of the moon where the chalk lifted." A pause. "That is the binding sigil of Bramblewood, Mother. It has not changed in 300 years. The chamber went absolutely still. Garrick Hale rose from the council bench. "He cheated!" His voice cracked across the stone. "He cheated, Mother. There is no man in this room who can tell a smudge of chalk through a silk band. He has been told. He has been prepared. Somebody in this hall has been feeding him the answer through the air, and I tell you now, before the elders and before this pack, there is only one person in this room with the kind of unnatural sense that could have done it." He turned. His finger came up. It pointed across the rope. "That woman," he said, "that woman is no Ashbury, Mother. That woman is a Cedarfall. I have seen the warmth in her hands myself. There is a witch in this hall, and she has bewitched the Alpha of Bramblewood, and unless this pack acts tonight, she will see us all burned in our own beds before the snow." The pack did not move. The pack did not breathe. Wren stepped forward. She lifted Lark's hand off her own and pressed it gently back into Esther's keeping. She crossed under the rope into the open floor of the chamber. She did not look at Garrick. She walked across the black cloth, around the silver sigil, past the two elders, and she did not stop until she stood at Bastian's side. He turned his face toward her step. She took his hand. "My name," she said, and her voice carried in the stone room without her having to raise it at all, "is Wren Ashbury, daughter of Hollis Ashbury of the Coast Road, granddaughter of Anwen Cedarfall of Crescent Cove. My grandmother was the sister of Maren Cedarfall, who served this hall and died in its kitchen. The warmth in my hands is the warmth of my line. I have not used it in 5 years. I used it yesterday to keep Calder Ronan from dying of a fall that was not a fall." She turned her head slowly toward Garrick. "From a fall that was not a fall, my lord." Garrick had gone the color of old paper. "And my husband," she said, "did not cheat his test. He has been blind for 7 years. He is blind now." She lifted her free hand to the embroidered band over his eyes and did not touch it. "He named the sigil because I named it for him in the smallest whisper I could make 3 breaths ago, in the language only my line still speaks. If that is a crime in this hall, then take me. If it is not, then take your hand off this packed seat, Garrick Hale, and step back where the council bench was meant to keep you." The oldest elder rose from her bench. She was not a tall woman. She did not need to be. The chamber turned toward her as one body. "Wren of the Cedarfall line." Her voice was very quiet. "Will you set your hands on Edda Wren now, before this pack, and show us the warmth?" The eldest of the 3 elders stepped forward. Wren had not known her name until that moment. Edda Wren, the woman she had been named for, in some forgotten branch of her mother's family, in a cabin on the coast road her father had never let her ask about. Wren laid both of her hands on the old woman's right knee. It was the knee that had not bent properly in 30 years. The pack watched the soft amber light bloom up from her palms. The pack watched Edda Wren's mouth open, slowly, in something between a laugh and a cry. The pack watched the old elder stand straight, for the first time since before any of them had been born, and take a single step forward on a leg that had finally remembered itself. The elder bowed her head. "This woman is no witch," she said. "This woman is the Cedarfall come home. The binding in the grove last night was witnessed by every soul in this hall. Wren Ashbury is the Luna of Bramblewood under pack law, and the daughter of our oldest oath under blood law. Whoever raised a hand against her, or against the alpha she has chosen, has raised a hand against this pack." Her gaze rose slowly and fixed on the council bench. "Garrick Hale, stand." Garrick did not stand. "Stand, my lord, or be made to." 2 of the council members rose without being asked and laid their hands, gently but very firmly, on Garrick Hale's shoulders. He stood. At the back of the chamber, beyond the rope, the door eased open. A boy from the stable came in, breathless. He bent to Esther's ear. Esther's face went still. She crossed the floor to Wren, without speaking, and she said, in a voice low enough that only Wren and Bastian could hear, "Your father, child, a messenger from Port Angeles. He is dying. He asks for you." They rode out of Bramblewood at dusk, the same day. Bastian came with her. He would not let her go alone. He sat at the front of the small dark wagon beside Calder, who had refused to be left behind, and he wore the embroidered silk band still over his eyes, because he had decided, before they left the gate, that no one outside the inner circle of his hall would ever learn that he was learning again how to see. Wren sat behind them with Esther beside her, wrapped in a heavy grey cloak, her hands folded in her lap, the soft amber warmth glowing very faintly under her left sleeve. The ride to the coast road took 5 hours. They did not speak much. There was nothing left to say that the silence was not already saying for them. The cabin was small and unlovely in the grey evening. Wren had grown up inside it, but it felt smaller to her now. The way every childhood house feels smaller the first time you come back to it as a woman who has been given another. The lamp in the front window was burning. Someone, a woman from the coast settlement Wren did not recognize, had come up to sit with Hollis through the day, because the sheriff's deputies who had been sent to take him had taken pity instead. Hollis Ashbury had collapsed on the way to the holding cells. The pneumonia he had carried in his chest all autumn had broken him on the long ride east, and they had brought him home instead of to the jail, because no jail in Port Angeles wanted to be the one to bury him. Wren stepped down from the wagon. Bastian came after her. He did not take the band from his eyes. Calder stayed on the box with the reins. Esther walked Wren to the door of the cabin and then stopped on the threshold, because some doors a daughter has to walk through alone. The room smelled of damp wood and a man's sickness. Hollis lay on the narrow bed against the far wall, propped half upright on a folded blanket. He had lost weight she had not thought he could afford to lose. His hair was matted with sweat. His hands lay open on top of the quilt, palms up, the way the hands of dying men so often do, as if asking for something they had not been able to name in life. His eyes were open. They found her. Wren. She did not answer at first. She crossed the small room. She set her carpet bag, the same one she had left this house with at first light 4 days ago, on the kitchen table. She drew off her gloves. She came to the side of the bed and sat down on the small wooden stool that was the only seat in the room. "Hello, Father." "You came." "I came." His mouth worked. He turned his face away from her against the blanket. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, and she had not seen her father weep in 22 years. "I sold you," he said. "I know. I sold you twice. I sold you for the gold, and I sold you after for the council seat. And the second sale was the worse one, Wren. The second one I cannot make a story about. The first one I could pretend was for the land. The second one was for me." His chest shook on the next breath. "I did not know what I had in this house. I never looked. I never looked at you, Wren. Not once. I'm dying tonight. And I have only just understood that I have spent 22 years not looking at the only good thing your mother ever gave me." She did not answer. She lifted her left hand from her lap. She laid it, very gently, against the center of his chest, over the broken lung that had stopped serving him weeks ago. The amber warmth bloomed under her palm. Hollis's eyes widened. "Wren," he whispered. "Child, you can do that. You can do that. You have been able to do that all these years." "Yes. And I, God forgive me, I would have." His mouth twisted. "I would have used you for it. I would have known, and I would have used you for it. You were right to hide it from me. Oh, child, you were right." "I'm not going to use it to keep you alive tonight, Father." He went very still under her hand. "I'm not going to use it," she said quietly, "because some things the warmth cannot fix, and some things it is not meant to fix, and one of them is what is wrong inside your lungs tonight. I cannot give you back the years. I cannot give you back the time you did not spend looking at me. I do not have that kind of warmth in my hands. No one does." He closed his eyes. "But," she said, and her voice gentled, "what I can do, what my grandmother told me the warmth was for on the only afternoon I ever spent with her, is take the pain. I can take it out of your chest and out of your ribs and out of the place behind your eyes where it has been pressing on you for weeks. I can let you go without it. That is what I am going to do for you tonight, Father. Not because you deserve it, not because you have asked for it, but because I'm not the girl you sold. I am the woman who chose to come back." She left her hand on his chest. She let the warmth move, slowly, the way her grandmother had taught her in a single afternoon. Not the warmth that closed wounds, the other warmth. The warmth that drew out what hurt and let a man rest. Hollis breathed out, longer than he had breathed out in a month. His shoulders softened against the blanket. The pinched place between his brows let go. He opened his eyes. They were clear for the first time in days. "Wren." "Yes, I am sorry. I know." "Will you forgive me, child?" She did not answer at once. She thought about the kettle on the floor of this kitchen 4 days ago. She thought about the leather pouch on the table. She thought about the smooth voice on the landing, and the cedars in the grove, and a candle-lit garden under a full moon. She thought about who she had been when she walked out of this house, and who she was now, sitting beside the man who had not looked at her for 22 years. "You sold me, thinking you were getting rid of me," she said quietly. "But you gave me, without knowing it, the only house in which I have ever been seen. I forgive you, Father, not for what you did, for what you did taught me about who I had always been." He took her hand. He held it. Some time after the moon had risen over the cedars again, with his daughter's hand still warm in his own, and the pain finally gone from his chest, Hollis Ashbury let go of the world he had spent his whole life trying to bargain with, and he went out of it quietly. Wren was the last thing he looked at. She sat with him for a long time after the breath had stopped. Then she stood. She drew the quilt up to his chest. She closed his eyes. She walked out into the small front room of the cabin, where Bastian was waiting for her in the dark, the embroidered band still in place, and she put her arms around his neck without speaking, and he held her with both arms, in a room where no one was watching, for as long as she needed to be held. A month passed. The autumn rains thinned and gave way to the first cold blue mornings of the year. The black river ran clear over its stones. The cedars dropped their needles in soft red drifts along the paths of the inner grove. In the great hall of Bramblewood, the lamps had been lit for the first time in 7 years, one by one, in the slow, careful manner of a household that had forgotten what evenings looked like and was learning again. Calder, who had been on his feet within the week and back at his post within 2, kept the keys of the kitchen with one hand and a long, careful eye on every passage. Esther had moved her own things into the small chamber off the kitchen and slept now, where she could hear if anyone tried to walk through the lower halls in the dark. Garrick Hale was no longer at Bramblewood. The elders had taken the case from the council and given it to the elders' court at the inner ring. He had been stripped of his seat, his lands, and his right to set foot inside the cedar grove. He had been escorted under guard to a holding at the far edge of the Bramblewood territory, where he would live out his remaining years in a small stone house, fed and clothed, but watched. Wren had not asked for that. The elders had decided. The pack had agreed. Hollis Ashbury was buried in the small cemetery above Crescent Cove, beside the wife he had outlived. Wren had gone to the burial alone, except for Bastian. She had laid her own hand on the headstone for a long time. She had wept, finally, the way she had not let herself weep in any other place. Bastian had stood behind her with one hand resting on her shoulder, the silk band still over his eyes in case anyone from the coast saw them, and he had not spoken until she was ready to go. Lark Hale spoke now, not constantly, not easily, but she spoke. She had moved out of the small house at the edge of the inner grove and into a room of her own in the main hall, 2 doors down from the kitchen. She came to dinner with the rest of them. She sat across from Wren most nights, and Wren had begun to teach her, slowly, what their grandmothers had once taught their own granddaughters about the warmth in a healer's hands. Lark would have her own gift one day. Maren Cedar Falls' blood was in her. It had only fallen asleep beside her brother on the night of the fire. It was waking up now. On the night of the second full moon of Wren's marriage, Bastian led her out of the great hall again, the same way he had led her out on the night of her wedding, down the narrow corridor, through the heavy door bound in iron, around the base of the west tower, into the garden. Esther had done what she had been asked to do. Again, the 12 white candles were lit in their curve of stone. The cream wool quilt was folded on the mossy ledge. The dark bottle of wine stood between two glasses on the flat stone. The moon, full and clear of the cedars, hung directly overhead. Bastian stopped just inside the hedge. He turned to her. "Wren." "Yes." "Take it off, my love." She lifted both of her hands. She untied the embroidered silk band at the back of his head. She let it fall into her palms. He opened his eyes. He could see her clearly now. The warmth in her hands had been giving him a little more each night for a month, the way her grandmother had taught her. Slow, never pushed, always invited. The left eye still focused more slowly than the right. The scar across his cheek would never fade entirely. He would always wear the silk band in the daylight, in front of the pack, because the choice to be a blind alpha was one he had decided in his chair 7 years ago, and because the choice to be Wren's husband in the dark of his own tower had become a thing he wanted to keep just for her. But here, on the moss under 12 candles and a full moon, with the warmth glowing softly under her left palm and her hair loose down her back, the way the wives of the old packs had worn it for 1,000 years, he could see her completely. The face he had carried inside his chest for 7 years was alive in front of him. He drew her down to the quilt. He took both of her hands. "Wren Hale of Bramblewood," he said softly. "I knew you in the dark. Before I ever saw your face in this life, I knew the sound of your step and the warmth of your hand and the way your breath changed when you were afraid. I chose you in the dark, and then, when the moon decided, I chose you again in the light. There is no version of any world in which I would not choose you." He lifted her hands and pressed them, palms together, against his mouth. "You are the brambled moon of my life. Bramble Moon, the thing that came to me out of the rainforest after 7 years of silence and gave me back the world. I will not waste another day of it. I swear it on the candles in this curve of stone, and on the cedars at the edge of this grove, and on every name we used to use in a forest we were never supposed to meet in." Wren was crying. She did not try to stop it. "Bastian, yes, I love you. I know. I have loved you," she said, "since I was 12 years old, and I have not stopped for a single day. In any of the years I thought you were gone. You were not gone. You were only walking back to me in the dark, and I am going to spend the rest of this life walking with you in whatever light my hands can find for you." He kissed her. The quilt was warm beneath them. The candles held steady. The moon held her place over the cedars. From the far side of the river, the long, low note of a wolf rose and was answered, and was held and answered again, and the pack of Bramblewood, who had not howled together under a moon in 7 years, sang for a long time into the cold blue night. Across the garden, in the shadow of the hedge, 3 figures stood and watched. They did not interrupt. Esther had her arm around Calder's shoulders. Lark, between them, was smiling without sound, the way she had once cried without sound, and her dark eyes were full of light. In Lark's hand, held out toward Wren as if she had been waiting for the right moment all evening, was a single white flower of cedar, picked that afternoon from the tree at the edge of the inner grove. She crossed the garden quietly. She knelt at Wren's side. She took Wren's left hand, the one that carried the warmth, and she laid the small white flower across the open palm. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Wren looked down at the cedar flower lying across her own warmth, and she felt, for the smallest fraction of a second beneath the soft amber glow under her skin, a second small light answer it from somewhere deeper inside her. A light that had not been there a month ago. A light that was its own. Across from her, Bastian Hale, who could see her now in the candlelight as clearly as he had once seen her in a summer forest, saw the 2 small lights together under his wife's palm before she did. His breath caught, very softly. He did not speak. He did not have to. He drew her in against his chest, and he held her there, in a garden lit by 12 white candles under a full and watching moon. And he understood, with a calm and absolute joy, that no pack, and no council, and no contract on a cabin table could ever take from them again. That he had not only been given back his world, he had been given back its future. Our channel has been demonetized, but we don't want to stop our project here. So if you'd like to know how their story began, all the way until the Alpha lost his sight, click the link in the first comment and watch it ad-free. See you in the next video.